We learn from experience in a variety of ways. If you think about a person learning how to fly in plane, this is a great example of experiential learning. First, a person will directly embody experience that engages mentally, physically, and emotionally in the moment. Learning from simulated experiences, like flying a plane, is another way that we learn. Reliving a past experience, collaboration with others, and introspective experience. When you're learning to fly a plane, you reenact possible situations in an aircraft, mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's a simulated experience where you have a teacher in the play. Then you relive the past experience when you're on the ground talking about the lesson, and you collaborate with your teacher to gather further information about the flight lesson. Then you think reflectively, introspective, about the experience on ways that you can improve. There are different theoretical There are 5 different perspectives or theoretical concepts about experiential learning. The first one is constructivist. This is where you reflect on a concrete experience. So if you were flying a plane, you would reflect on that experience. By using that reflection, you can construct new knowledge as a result of the reflection, which focuses the learner's making meaning on the process. Situative is another theory. Situative, participating in a community of practice. If you're learning how to fly, you also take classes in a college campus to learn with a community of learners as well. Knowing is intertwined with doing, learning rooted in learning in the situation. So you also learn by intertwining those experiences that you have in the plane and in the situation with a community of practice. Then there is psychoanalytic, getting in touch with the unconscious desires and fears. Unconscious interfering with conscious experiences, complex role of desire in learning. So perhaps maybe you're unconsciously afraid of crashing the plane, but as you gain more experience, those conscious beliefs that, oh, I can control it, overtake. And it's a very complicated, intertwined mix between the two. Critical culture is about resisting dominant social norms of experience. They transform existing social orders by critically questioning. So perhaps after you're done finishing your flight lesson, you would critically question how you did in your performance, if there were things that you could do better in the next time. Complexity theory is exploring ecological relationships. It focuses on relationships between experiences. Learning produced by interaction among consciousness, identity, action, interaction, objects, and dynamics of complex systems. So basically, it's the relationships between all these experiences and things that are going on in our own mind that help us learn. So maybe when we're thinking about how we flew the plane and then we're in a simulator situation, how we might actually learn better behavior from that. There were also important people that brought along research into the realm of experiential learning. One of those such people was Linderman, and what he said was the resource of the highest value in adult education is the learner's experience, the adult learner's living textbook, already there waiting to be appropriated. So there's experience out there that people can already bring into their own realm of understanding. And then there's Noel, and what he believed was learning is a continuous process grounded in experience. Knowledge is continuously derived and tested out in the experiences of the learner. Perhaps if you read something in a flight book that did not make sense and then actually did it in the plane, it would make more sense because it would be grounded in the experience versus just reading about it. Adult educators have made the connections between the experience and the learning, but are still trying to use it effectively with both formal and non-formal learning situations. So a formal learning situation might actually be in the classroom where you're learning about the theory. Non-formal might be a learning situation where you talk to other pilots about your experience in the plane and how to deal with the specific situation. Then there was John Dewey, who wrote Experience in Education in 1938. And he said, all genuine education comes through experience, but not all experiences are genuinely or equally educative. It's our job as educators or facilitators to make those experiences educational for the students in our class. The first principle of continuity, the principle of continuity of experience, means that every experience both takes up something from those which have gone before and modifies it in some way the quality of those which comes after. This was also a principle created by John Dewey. What this quote means is that experiences provide us with learning that are just not isolated events that occur. Learners must connect learning from current experiences with past ones and see possible future implications. If we go back to the plane example again, if you learn something in a simulator and then go up in a plane and try that actual learning experience there, you can see how you would use it in your future career. The next theory that John Dewey came up with was interaction. An experience is always what it is because of a transaction taking place between an individual and what at the time constitutes his environment. So in this case of the plane, the environment would be the actual plane where the person was learning. The key for applying Dewey to education is that it's important that the situation we put the learner in promotes learning. Developing a welcoming and comfortable atmosphere, the right materials, and linking materials to learners' experience is critical in assisting adults to learn. So if we tried to give a learner maybe a paper replica of a plane and told them to fly that would not be as educational as actually have them in the plane working the controls. Another really great way to think about experience in education is to use art as an example. There is a theory by Knoll and Knoll that gives the 6 general propositions of experiential learning theory. The first one of these is learning is a process, not an outcome. If you're creating an art piece, you're trying to learn a technique. Perhaps if you're learning how to make a sculpture, you're learning how to put together three-dimensional objects. It does not have to be successful at first, but eventually, from learning the process, it will become a better learning experience. Learning is relearning. It's the second principle. Ideas must be drawn out, discussed, and refined. Perhaps after you've drawn out your idea and go actually to build a sculpture, you might see that it might not work for so-and-so reasons. Maybe the material is too brittle to work with. So you have to discuss and refine your idea to make it actually work. The third proposition is learners must move between opposing modes of reflection and action, feeling and thinking. Basically, you have to go out and try it and reflect on your actions and see if it actually worked. If it did work, then you keep going and you keep doing this process over and over until you get to where you want to be. The fourth is learning is holistic. The fifth is learning involves interactions between learners and the environment. So if we go back to the art example, learners need to learn in an art studio, and that helps them better learn because that's the environment that most learning can take place for an artist. The final is learning is constructivist in nature. New knowledge is constructed. It's built up over time by experience. Models of experiential learning. Knope, who built on work primarily of Dewey, Gent, and Levin, works, he was able to come up with 4 different kinds of abilities required for learning from experience. There was concrete experience, which would be an openness and willingness to involve yourself in new experiences. So perhaps as an artist, you might learn a new technique. Say if you were a sculptor, you would learn how to paint. And the next was reflective observation. Observational and reflective skills, so these new experiences can be viewed from a variety of perspectives. In an art classroom, this happens through critique, where multiple people view your work and give different perspectives on it and allow you to reflect on their different perspectives. The next was abstract conceptualization, which is the analytical abilities, so integrative ideas and concepts can be created from these observations. Perhaps you learned from the critique of a different technique that better fits your painting, so you start using that technique in your painting instead. Active experimentation, which is decision-making and problem-solving skills, so these new ideas and concepts can be used in actual practice. So take for example that you learned a new painting technique where you applied the paint more thickly onto the canvas and it gave you a better texture. Then maybe you would experiment with that using your old technique as well to come up with something new and completely different. This way it was integrated actually into your actual practice. Actions taken in the long end turn into the beginning of the experiential learning cycle again. There were a couple of flaws in Knope's model. However, learners' context was not taken into consideration, and it does not account for the issues of power in the experiential learning environment. There are also 2 main types of learning from experience. Non-reflective learning, remembering an experience and repeating it, or just doing what you're told to do. So perhaps if you were in an art environment where you had just been taught how to create a mold, you would repeat that because the instructor told you to, not because you reflected on it, but because you remembered the experience and just repeated it. A reflective learning experience is where we plan, monitor, and reflect upon our experiences. So perhaps we made the mold as the instructor had told us to, but we found that it fell apart and it did not actually produce the results we wanted. So we would change and modify that idea to get a better result, and then reflect upon those experiences.